Hello, aloha, and welcome to Touchful Podcast, and welcome officially in 2024. I know that I already said that in the previous episode, which I released on the 1st of January 2024. I already greeted you and wished you all the best in 2024, but the truth is that, of course, technically speaking, I was recording that episode back in 2023. So tonight, it is the first time when I officially actually record an episode in 2024. So I want to welcome myself in this new year and welcome you. And thank you for being here and thank you for choosing to spend a moment of your life with me. It is a great honor. I am having a interesting beginning of the year. Interesting is this really unuseful word which doesn't tell you anything. So instead of interesting, I should say I'm having a little bit of an intense beginning of the new year. I had a beautiful New Year's Eve and a beautiful first day of the year of 2024. And today, it's 3rd of January when I'm recording this. I woke up and for the whole day, since the morning, I just couldn't make sense out of myself. I couldn't find a space. I couldn't find a way to be with myself in any way that would feel comfortable. Just simply being with myself and with my own thoughts felt uncomfortable. And these are normally the moments when very often in our life we reach for distractions, for watching a movie or a TV series, or like scrolling through Instagram reels, or overeating, or whatever your ways are. These are usually mine, doom scrolling and overeating. Not to sit with myself, not to feel myself. Because the moment I start to sit with myself and feel myself, I start to tap into discomfort. But at the same time, I am way too smart for that. I know myself way too well to totally fall into that trap. So the moment I identified what is going on, that I just feel super uncomfortable with myself, and I'm just trying to do everything that takes me away from myself and spending a moment with myself. The moment I identified that, I knew that that was the moment when I had to drop everything that I was doing, turn off the phone, and just really sit in that discomfort. And I did that. And I fucking hate it. In days like this, these are the days that are most difficult for me, and at the same time, these are the days of the greatest growth. These are the days of breakthroughs. And I want to share, I'm not sure if it's a breakthrough, but I want to share some insights with you, some things that I discovered as I was sitting with myself. I started journaling. This is something what sometimes helps me when I just cannot sit with myself and with my own thoughts because they're driving me insane. Then I sometimes start journaling. Or sometimes, like today, I use cards. I have a deck of cards which is called Sacred Inquiry. And this is a beautiful deck. It's a beautiful conversation starter as well. I use these cards often with my friends because this is a deck of cards, like over 70 cards with different questions. Maybe I will actually even leave you the link in the description of this episode to the cards so you can see how they look like, or you can even buy them if you want to. It's not a sponsored link. People who created these cards, they don't even know that I exist. But I really, really like them, and I use them with my clients sometimes, and with my friends, and with myself. So I took that deck, and the card and the question that came to me today was, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? And like I said, I had quite a rough start of a day, and I was just was feeling really uncomfortable with myself and sort of feeling this pressure building up in me, and I was like, I don't even know what I want. And then I saw that question. I was like, come on. I somehow got so irritated with that question, which usually is a very good sign. If I get a question from this deck and it just irritates me and I don't want to look at it, then it's usually the sign for me that I definitely should look at it. So I decided to be brave and really sit with the question. What would I do if I wasn't afraid? What would I do if I wasn't afraid? And because English is not my first language, I also translated this question to my native tongue, which is Polish. And then I started feeling into, first of all, how this question makes me feel. And what came immediately was sadness and discomfort and just like feeling that I'm kind of like uncomfortable in my own body. But I kept on going. And if you want to, I invite you to ask yourself this question and see what opens up for you, especially if you feel some resonance with this question. You can journal on it. And if English is not your first language, I highly recommend to translating this question to your native language, because at least in my case, I have a feeling that different things open up for me when I think in Polish versus when I think in English. But anyhow, I wrote that the question, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? And I started just feeling into it, breathing with a hand on my heart and journaling. And to my surprise, so many things came up. So many parts of my life, things that I would like to do in my life. But for some reason, I am maybe not doing them because I am afraid. And the more I was writing them down, the more surprised I was at what comes up. And the more relieved I felt also. I started to reconnect to myself more and more the more I was journaling on that question. And this is what I would like today's episode to be about fear and courage, about some insights that I got from sitting with myself, sitting in discomfort, sitting in the fire of that question, and why I also think that this question is actually not the best one. I also want to share a little bit of these insights with you. So I invite you today for an honest, open, raw, and vulnerable talk about fear and courage. What would you do if you were not afraid? I have the list of the things that I wrote down. I have it in front of me in my notebook. And I'm not going to share all of them with you because some of them, they feel quite private and they feel quite intimate. But one of the things that I wrote down and that I want to share with you is that I wrote down that if I was not afraid, I would speak about my dreams even louder. I would dream even bigger dreams and bolder dreams and more crazy dreams, and I would speak about them even louder and to everybody who wants to listen. Because one of the truths about me, but I kind of feel again that I'm not the only one, at least I hope that I'm not, is that we sometimes have tendencies to, at least definitely I do, sometimes to make my dreams a little smaller, to make them a little less bold, because then it's easier for me to talk about them, to share them, because they don't feel like something that is too big for me. I wonder how this resonates with you. And then another thing that I wrote down, and I want to say it out loud actually, is that I wrote down that if I was not afraid, I would definitely speak more Icelandic, and I would speak it with joy every time I want to anybody that I want. So a little bit of a context here. Maybe you're here for the first time or you don't know me that well. So I'm Polish. I live in Iceland. I've been living here for 8 years. So my first language is Polish, my second language is English, and then my third language is Icelandic, which is mostly passive language, which means that I don't speak it, but I understand most of it. And I have this deep dream inside me and this deep desire to start speaking more Icelandic, but at the same time, of course, there is lots of like fear and being shy and all kinds of things built around that. So this is one of the things that I wrote down, that I would actually speak more Icelandic if I was not afraid. And also another thing that I wrote down that is that if I was not afraid, I would live my life in the most brave and courageous way, because I only have one life. I only have these many moments, and how many of them are, I don't want to say wasted. I don't believe that we waste our moments when we are afraid, but how many of them are colored by fear? On how many occasions I do not show up with my beauty, with my talents, with my quirkiness, with my joy, with my love, because I am afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of being judged, afraid of being rejected, of course, afraid of being laughed at, and so on and so forth. And then I was journaling and I was diving deeper into that question, and new things were opening up in me, and I even cried a little. And then I realized at some point that this is not the right question to ask. I don't need to be unafraid. I simply need to have courage. And I know that it might sound like the same things, but they are not. At least not to me. So instead of asking myself the question, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? I asked myself a question, what would I do if I had courage? And I invite you to feel into these two questions, how they resonate in you, how your body reacts to each and every of them, and what kind of doors open up inside you, in your heart, in your soul, in your consciousness with these two questions. Question one being, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? And question two being, what would I do if I had courage? And I like this second question much more, simply because I believe, at least that's what my life shows me, that you don't need to be unafraid to have courage and to do courageous things in life. And this is where I would like to stop, and I would like to elaborate on that a little more, because I find this, first of all, extremely important and also very fascinating. So, courage does not mean that you are not afraid. In fact, I would say that courage doesn't exist without discomfort or without feeling fear or discomfort in a given situation. Because otherwise it would be just recklessness or stupidity. And the greatest example that comes to me right now, an example from my life, is the courage that I had to completely change my life a couple of months ago, when I decided that I was going to terminate my lease agreement in the apartment that I was living in, and that I would move to the countryside. I would move to that part of Iceland where I have always wanted to live, but I never had the courage. Here's like the the core of that. I never had enough courage to do that until I had. And I also want to tell you a little bit about like where does the courage comes from, at least how I feel it. So when I took that decision to completely change my life, to just flip it, was I afraid? Of course. Sometimes I was just shit scared. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night, already after I terminated my lease. And just to give you a little bit of context again, it was a really beautiful apartment that I was living in, and I had my Lomi practice there. I was there for 6 or 7 years living in that apartment. I had very good money, really nice neighborhood. My business was thriving there. Everything was good, except it wasn't. It wasn't in a sense that my heart wanted something else. But logically, everything was good. But I wanted something else. I wanted to move out to the countryside and live at the end of the world like I do now. But for all these years, I didn't have the courage. The proportion of fear to courage was always that I had more fear than courage. Until one day, it kind of flipped. And that was the day when I felt that for the first time in my life, I had more courage than fear. So in order to be courageous and do courageous things in your life, you don't need to have 100% courage in your heart. You just need 51% of courage. A little more courage than fear. And to me, it meant that fear would still wake me up in the middle of the night, and I would think, oh my God, what have I done? What did I do? Like, what am I doing? Like, I don't have a place to live. I don't know where I will be living. I don't know how will I be making money. I mean, I have some ideas, but I have no idea if it will work. I know nothing. I am going towards complete unknown. And that fear would wake me up in the middle of the night. But the courage was bigger than the fear. It was more scary to stay in the current situation, even though it was logically a good situation with a beautiful apartment and a good life and good income and good settled life. But at some point, it just became more scary to continue living like this and not pursuing my dreams than risking it all for a dream. Another example, a very like vulnerable example, and a kind of like a very private one for me, but I still want to share it because, again, I feel that I am not the only one with that story, is that when I mustered the courage to, many years ago, to leave my husband. I was married for a very short time, and it was a very unhappy marriage for both of us. And it felt super scary to leave and to start everything on my own and to give up on that happily ever after dream. But at some point, it just became more scary and more painful to stay than to go. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? That you don't need to muster all the courage in the world. You just need this 1%, 0.5%, a little teeny weeny little more courage than fear. And it doesn't mean that the moment you have that courage, the fear will be gone. It will be there. It might even be there always. Like even now, when I'm living my dream. I live in a place where I wanted. I live in a house in which I wanted to live. I spend my days like I wanted to spend them. And still, every now and then, I have this fear coming back to me of like, was it the right choice? How will it be? How will it be in the future? Where am I heading? And all that. And it's fine. It's fine if the fear comes. I let it come because I know that I am not that fear. I am so much more. I'm gonna take a sip of water and let it sit a little bit in me and in you, what I just shared. So one of the things that I'm discovering is that courage doesn't exist without fear, and it doesn't need to. There is no point in you waiting for that day when you finally will not be afraid. That day, my love, most likely will not come, because it doesn't work like this. It works the opposite. You do something even though you are afraid, but you muster the courage. You choose courage. You choose that over fear. And by doing that, you prove yourself that you survived. It didn't kill you. It was okay, even if it was difficult, even if your voice was shaking, even if your hands were shaking, even if your heart was beating like crazy, then you still did it, despite the fear or the stress. So there is no point in doing something that I was doing for a very long time with various things in my life. I was just waiting to be ready for that travel, for that big project, for that conversation, for that podcast that I wanted to record. And it never worked like this. When I look back at my life, at all kinds of different moments of my life, it never worked like that. That even if I was telling myself, okay, I'm ready, I'm doing this, it didn't mean that all the fear was gone. I very often compare it to that. To me, it feels like standing on the edge of the cliff, waiting to be ready to take that step. And the most beautiful things in my life happened when I took that leap of faith. When I chose to believe that I will not crash on the ground. When I chose to believe that actually there was no ground that I could crash on. And that is, I think, another way I like to look at courage, that it is paired always. Courage is married to such huge vulnerability. And I feel that the greater the courage, the greater the vulnerability, the greater the dream, the greater the opening in me needs to be. And courage is vulnerability, and vulnerability is courage. They are married together. Courage is to be vulnerable. I like how Brené Brown defines it, that it means to show up without having the control of the outcome. That is the courage, that is the vulnerability. And that is where the greatest gift is, the greatest change, the greatest opening. And what I'm starting to understand more and more is that it will always mean discomfort. It will always mean a certain level of discomfort. It will always mean a certain level of fear. It will always mean a certain level of vulnerability. But what I also start to understand more and more is that there is actually no other option. Because what other option do I have? That other option would be to live a life that is mediocre, and knowing that I have just this one life, I'd rather practice putting myself through discomfort and through vulnerability and through fear to find out what is on the other side of that. And what would I do if I had courage? And even when I ask this question now, after journaling about it throughout the day and after sitting with it and talking to you about it, I can still feel that I'm a little like angry and irritated at that question, because it shows me these areas of my life where I am not showing up with courage and vulnerability because of some fantasies I have about rejection, or about failing, or about being criticized, or about all kinds of things. So many times in my life I chose to protect myself from pain rather than to open myself up to the possibility of my dreams coming true, to the possibility of love, to the possibility of connection, compassion, care, beauty, all the amazing things that I care about. And I remember, I was probably talking to a friend, if I recall, and she said that yes, it takes courage to be alive. It does. It takes courage to not to merely exist, but to be alive, to show up, to make your dreams come true, to be extraordinary, which means basically to be yourself. You already are extraordinary. You have the talents, the gifts, the greatness that only you are able to bring to this world. And I know that it's like such a cliche. I know everybody says that, but everybody says that because it really is true. And yes, it takes courage to be alive, to be you, to live the life that you want, to live the life that makes you alive. It takes courage, it takes vulnerability, it takes discomfort, it takes taking that step off that cliff, opening your arms wide and experiencing this free fall with full trust that there is no ground that you can crash on. But like I said, what is the alternative? The alternative for me at this time of my life, the alternative is merely existing or living more and more bitter life, or life with more and more regret. Recall a moment from your life that was like a moment of true courage for you. Maybe it was a difficult conversation that you needed to have with somebody. I remember one conversation that I had with my dad, and for the first time ever, I told him that I do not want him to say this and this ever again to me. And that was super vulnerable. And I remember my voice was shaking and my hands were shaking. But that started a beautiful healing process between us. So maybe you had a difficult conversation. Maybe you had to say that you were sorry, or maybe you had to put a boundary with somebody. Maybe you took a very difficult decision about some big change in your life, something that left you with your heart pounding and your hands shaking and your voice trembling, but still you knew, deep inside you knew that it was a good thing to do, a thing that nourishes you, a thing that opens up your heart. And maybe the feeling that you had when you did that, when you showed up with courage, when you showed up as courage, maybe the feeling that you had after was the feeling that I usually or always have after these moments, that I feel embraced by love. I feel that when I choose to show up with courage, the one that comes from the heart, because that is the meaning of the word courage. I just found out recently that it is from the part of that meaning is from the Latin word cor, which means heart. So when you choose to show up with courage, to show up from the place of your heart, then there can be no other response than the response of love from the world. And even if sometimes it might mean that a certain relationship is ending, or something in your life changes dramatically, you change a job, or a place where you live, or a friendship ends, or something in your marriage changes, or whatever, but I firmly believe, and this is one of the core beliefs of my life, that if I will show up with courage, which means that I will show up with my heart, that there is no way in the whole world that the outcome will not be the best possible outcome for me. So I would like to leave you today with two things. Number one is to ask yourself this question: what would I do if I had courage? And the good news is that you do. You do have the courage. So just ask yourself this question: what would I do if I had courage? And the second thing that I would like to leave you with today is this remembrance that you don't need to wait until you are not afraid, because you might wait for a very, 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 very long time. You don't need to wait until you are super ready. Like my good friend says, I was born ready. The fact that I am existing, that I have this dream, that I show up with full trust in my heart, these have to be the signs for me that I am ready. So remember that you don't need to wait until you are not afraid. You just need to have a little bit more courage than fear. Allow that courage to carry you, knowing that you are signing up for the ride of your life, and that you are signing up for feeling vulnerability, feeling discomfort, because that's what comes with showing up with your heart fully open. But what other choice do we have? Like I said in the previous episode about said that it is safe to be you, I said that in a previous episode, and I'm gonna say it again, that you are needed exactly as you are, with your fears and your traumas and your doubts and everything. You are needed. And what is the most needed is your courage to show up as yourself, to speak up about your dreams, to have the courage to live your life in a way you want to live it, because this way you are doing the greatest service to the whole world. At least that's what I believe in. And I think I'm gonna stop here. It ended up to be quite a weird episode for me to record, I must say. But I hope that I managed to convey at least a little bit of the message that I wanted to convey. I love you dearly. Thank you so much for spending a moment of your life with me. It's an honor and it's a pleasure. I am leaving all kinds of things and links and information in the description of this episode, so you can check it there. And I will talk to you sometime soon. Aloha. Bye bye.